Hello, we are Bernardita Alarcón and Vicente Benavides, and this is our task number 2 for applied linguistics. We are going to talk about the English teachers' practices from the school for our ELAV experience. Well, the school is San Felix School, which is located in the district of Maipú. There are 500 students approximately, and the levels are from elementary to high school. There's one course per letter. It's a school under vulnerable conditions, and it's subsidized by both the state and the parents. There are 35 students per class. The teacher of English is Guillermo Villalobos. He's 32 years old, and he studied at Autónoma University. He's working in two schools at the moment. In San Felix School, which is our school in which we based or conduct our research, and San Diego School. Also, on Saturdays, he teaches at La Araucana University. He is the only English teacher from this school, San Felix School.
The description of the process was a research that was implemented with a ethnographic description for analyzing the teacher's practices inside a classroom. Considering the register, we will identify features coming from the methodology and approaches and also techniques. The theory used to carry out this task will be approaches and methods in language teaching from Richards and Rogers.
As we mentioned before, we are going to base our research on the theory by Richards and Rogers, approaches and methods in language teaching. Therefore, we need to highlight the importance of the relationship between teacher and learner, because their role defines the type of interaction and characteristics of classroom in which a particular method is being used. The teacher roles in methods are related to the following issues: the type of functions teachers are expected to fulfill, whether that of practice director, counselor, or model, for example; the degree of control the teacher has over how learning takes place; the degree to which the teacher is responsible for determining the content of what is taught; and the interactional patterns that develop between teachers and learners.
From the analysis part, we found out that the theory of language or language learning was the structural linguistic process. The approaches that we saw in the teacher's practices were grammar translation, repetition, behaviorist approach, and reinforcement, among others. The method was the audiolingual method. This is a system, as we know, that combines grammar, lexical, syntax, the objectives. This method it is also based in the objectives from part of the teacher, because he uses to say the objectives first, and then the classes goes on through this dynamic. These objectives deals with the orientation of achievement, The proficiency of skills, as I said, is objective oriented. The procedure where the class exercises, practice on class and activities, as we will see afterwards.
An eighth grade was the course analyzed. In order to understand in a better way how the class works or function, um, we divided into three aspects based on the audiolingual method. First, the role of the materials or activities, then the role of the teacher, and then the role of the learner. Firstly, the role of the activities. We wonder how the activities are carried on through the class, and how these activities affects the learning process of the students. Well, the materials for elementary school um, are given by the school, um, in this case San Felix School, um, to all the teachers. So they don't use a textbook, they only use textbooks for high school. In this class, a paper was given to the students, in which they had a text that talked about teenagers and what they search on the internet, and then they had several questions. Um, this type of material are teacher orientated, and the materials for audiolingual methods assist the teacher to develop language mastery in the learner. So, by listening, repeating, and responding, they acquire mastery of the language. And this was the case of this class, in which the teacher made the students read some sentences of the text in order to understand it, and then he asked what was the text about, to see if they could understand it or not.
The second question that rises up is what is the teacher's role when implementing these practices? We have three examples. The teacher says 5 minutos más y el que no lo tenga será anotado en el libro. We saw here an audiolingual method and a behaviorism and reinforcement approach. We see clearly how the teacher gives a reinforcement in the example number 1 and 2. And the first one is bad reinforcement. It's like a punishment if students don't do what they have to do at the time that they have to. And in the second one is a positive reinforcement, because he gives a estrellita. He says, para los que hicieron bien hay una estrellita. And it's the same as before. It's an audiolingual method and behaviorism and reinforcement approach. We see that it is not only to give a reward or not, but he's trying to do a repetitive behavior among students, so they can do it then afterwards in a naturally way, or in a natural way, sorry. And in the example number 3, a student asks, ¿Qué significa for entertainment? And the teacher answers, para entretención. This is a cognitive model and it's grammar translation because he's giving the answer through translating the answer. He's not trying to explain that in English. It's just to make the connection with the first language and the second language.
In audiolingualism, as in situational language teaching, the teacher's role is central and active. It is a teacher-dominated method. The teacher models the target language, controls the direction and pace of learning, and monitors and corrects the learner's performance. Brooks argues that the teacher must be trained to do the following: introduce, sustain, and harmonize the learning of the four skills in his order: hearing, speaking, reading, and writing.
The third question that emerges when doing this task is related to the role of the students in the activities. We asked, how do students respond to the activities? We analyzed the register and we found out that the students were mostly askers because of the dynamic of the class. It was a teacher-centered class, and the teacher was the one in charge of everybody, and he had all the knowledge when teaching. An example of this is students raise their hands to ask to the teacher words that they don't understand. ¿Qué significa survey? As I said before, the student doesn't have it is not an autonomous person, and he has to ask to the teacher, who is the person, as I said, that has all the knowledge and is in control of the class. We also saw that they have a passive behavior in classes because there is a controlled participation or performance. For instance, uh, when teacher asks a student and there is another student that answers that question, the teacher says that that is not the time for him to talk because he's not asking him. That when only when he asks him is the time for him to talk, not before. Now, to contrast theory with the examples provided before, Richards claims that the learner roles are viewed as organisms that can be directed by skilled training techniques to produce correct responses. In accordance with behaviorist learning theory, teaching focuses on the external manifestations of learning rather than on the internal processes. Learners play a reactive role by responding to stimuli and thus have little control over the content, pace, or style of learning. They are not encouraged to initiate interaction because this may lead to mistakes. Learners do not always understand the meaning of what they are repeating is not perceived as a drawback.
Now that we have talked about the three main aspects of the class, we are going to move on to the linguistic skills. The teacher expresses directly and explicitly that he wants to um, address reading, listening, and writing. Um, Reading was the main skill that was developed during this class. When the teacher started the class, he wrote on the board the objective that was reading comprehension according text. So they listened when the teacher read the text, and some students also read it, but only sentences. Um, the process was a lower level process because they only recognized lexical access by word recognition, because they had to highlight the cognates. Um, when they wrote was when they were answering the questions of the text. So that was the only time for um, writing. When they when they speak, um, they don't speak in English, so they use mostly Spanish. Um, there was an activity that wasn't made because of bad time management. So, and that was the speaking part. To conclude, and in accordance with what Richard states, with respect to learning theory, we are concerned with an account of the central processes of learning and an account of the conditions believed to promote successful language teaching. These principles may or may not lead to a method. Teachers may, for example, develop their own teaching procedures, informed by a particular view of language and a particular theory of learning. They may constantly revise, vary, and modify teaching learning processes and the basis of the performance of the learners and their reactions to the instructional practice.